Good morning, everybody. A very short quotation I'd like to read to start with this morning. Okay. So this comes from a book by Anne C. Klein. And what she says is, attention is the start of love. There can be no love without attention. In cultivating attention, we're cultivating a possibility for intention and a possibility for connection. Okay. I'm going to read that again. Attention is the start of love. There can be no love without attention. In cultivating attention, we're cultivating a possibility for intention and a possibility for connection. So what's she talking about? She's talking about intimacy. She's talking about non-separation. When we bring the quality of our attention to things, we're no longer dwelling back in our ego, in our egocentric ways of being in the world, and we're entering it with intimacy. Now, she uses several of my favorite words there in addition. The first that she uses is the word love, a word that's seldom seen in Zen literature. Maybe seldom, maybe I'm exaggerating. It's probably it's probably less than seldom, you know. And I don't know what her particular brand of Buddhism is. I don't think she's Zen, but anyway. But here's this word popping up, and I've been thinking about it, One of the things, if we look at the history of Zen, one of the things that we find is that there are teachers who adapt to the disease of their time. The most famous example, excuse me, my voice isn't doing great this morning, is Bodhidharma. And when he arrived in China, what he found was attachment to Buddhist structures, to building beautiful temples, and to the Buddhist scriptures, the sutras. And so his response, as we know, very famous response, was to go off into a cave for 8 years, to walk away from all of that. And there's a koan that describes, where he just kind of leaves the emperor flabbergasted, just walks out, goes away. And there are other teachers throughout history. There's many examples. I mean, even Chow Chow is an example, who at a time that when there were many huge Zen temples, big congregations of students, 1,000, 1,500 students, with some of the teachers. He had the most minimalist little forest temple. He did nothing to repair it. It's a famous story about how he had a stool and it broke. So he just took a piece of firewood and tied it on and, went back. He himself, he describes himself that many of the monks at that time, the teachers had ornate brocaded robes, and he wore, kind of the same tattered old clothes. So another example of that. And those things are, when they are done by somebody like that, with the depth of awareness, then they are teaching. They are teaching by their examples. The other one that's kind of a little more controversial was Ikkyu, right? And when he thought that the monks of his time were way too pious and spending way too much time in the Zendo and not getting into the world, he spent his time drinking in brothels. Now that is kind of an extreme example, and perhaps even if the other monks weren't excessively pious, he might have been in drinking in brothels, but at least that was the premise. He was showing it up for what it was, coming the other way. So here, in our time, we have these diseases, one of which is indifference, one of which is the cult of the individual. Right? And love is and loving kindness are contrasts to that. They are one of the medicines that we need in this time. Relations, one of the medicines that we need. As our society plunges deeper into the cult of the individual, into this notion that it's all about me and whatever I do is okay, and the heck with you. As I see it, that's a disease. And love, therefore, to me, is becoming more and more of an acceptable word, an important word. It's something that we as Zen practitioners need to talk about. Now, we have to be careful, right? We can, love can very easily become another attachment, another delusion. So that's probably where the term loving kindness is better. It's a way of relating to our fellow beings as opposed to yet another acquisition for ourselves, right? That's what love often is, or how it's often realized, is as not yet another possession, yet another attachment. But loving kindness is something we give away. We give away. It's for the benefit of other beings. So I really like that word, and I like that the word is showing up more often. And I think it's I think it's part of the skillful response to these times. The next word that I like in here, let me bring up her little thing again. So she talks about there cannot be love without attention. And in cultivating attention, we're cultivating a possibility for intention and a possibility for connection. So there are two more really important words: intention and connection. I believe that our intention has great power. I was just talking yesterday about Masaru Emoto's experiments with water. Some of you may be familiar with them. And the gist of what Emoto did was he found a way of rapidly freezing water and then being able to study the crystalline structure. And the first experiment that he did with that was to have a Buddhist priest come, or monk, and bless water. And he took slides of the water crystals, both before and after the blessing. And in fact, there was a dramatic difference in the appearance. And he went on to conduct hundreds of experiments, and his son continues his work today. And again, one of the most dramatic was a polluted lake in Japan, that they had people surround the lake and do Buddhist prayer, and the water of the entire lake was transformed. And to me, that's the power of intention. And I don't think we get that by just saying words. But when we have a service, well, when we start out, all evil karma ever committed by me since of old. If I just say those words, I'm not so sure it does anything. But if I say it with real intention, with real meaning, then I believe it's very powerful. You know, we talked recently about healing and the healing services. You know, and when we're at when we're at a retreat at Treetop, for example, then every day there are names that are recited for healing at a certain point in the service. And there too, I believe that if our intention is focused, if we are strongly connected, she uses that word connection, then our words have some power. Really interesting. I mean, this is something that I'm just starting to learn about, and I find very interesting. But I think it is completely consistent with our teachings in terms of what we're not doing is going through life on cruise control, right? What Zen is talking about is engagement, intimate connection. Again, she uses those words. I believe that has transformative power, and most especially, I believe it is the medicine for the disease of our times. If we ever have too much loving kindness, then we can stop talking about loving kindness. When compassion is so overflowing, it's like, oh my God, another day of compassion, then we can stop talking about compassion. But when it's so absent in our culture, in our nation, in our world, I believe we have a tremendous responsibility to keep bringing it into the forefront. And of course, it's rooted in our teachings, in our practice, loving kindness and compassion, our Buddhist ideals. It's why our practice is more important than ever. This is the medicine. This is the medicine. Connection. Here we are. We're only connected by Zoom, but we are connected. That's why I only give the talks when I can see all of you, because it helps me have that connection. I couldn't give a talk to a blank screen. You know, and again, we're sort of, as we're living more and more in this virtual environment, kind of learning more about that, you know, but I see it in my work too. Every once in a while, I see some clients on telehealth, and every once in a while they'll say, well, I can't be home, so-and-so, so, you know, so how about we just talk on the phone? I refuse to do that. It's not the same. I need to see people. I need to connect to them. Where does, I'm not going to explain that. I don't know the explanation, but it's something very important. And connection isn't just showing up, well, at least there's certainly degrees of it. Just sitting in a coffee shop chatting is very different from being here together, practicing and engaging in a contemplative space, for lack of a better term, in a field of zazen. This is a good chance for me to put in a plug for the retreat at Treetop next weekend, and encourage you to whatever extent you can join. Sit with the group. It's going to be a larger group. It's going to be more people. It's going to be a more powerful field of connection. And so it's a really great opportunity that we have. And so it's kind of interesting, right? I mean, I used to have to travel 4.5 hours to go to a retreat, and that's not an exceptionally long time. I mean, but it's long enough. But now you can participate in the retreat right in your own home. Is it the same? No. But is it a lot better than nothing? Yes, absolutely. And again, you're developing that sense of connection. That's what Sangha is. That's the meaning of Sangha, connection. Right? Get us hard. We're like, we're Zen Buddhists, we're weird people. I'm going to say this, if we were Unitarians, when we got done with our practice, we'd have coffee, probably some nice cookies or something, and we'd spend time together, and we'd have interests in one another's lives and experiences and so on and so forth. In Zen, it's possible to practice 20 years and never know anything about the people that you're sitting with, right? Which is a little strange in and of itself. And yet, relationships develop. You can feel incredible if you've been sitting retreats someplace for years, and the people that are sitting around you, you can be incredibly close to those people and have never said more than 2 sentences. You can't tell them, you don't know what they do for work. You can't say whether they've got kids or not or any of that stuff, but you feel incredibly close to them. What's happening there? What's happening there? Intimacy, connection isn't dependent on words. Another interesting thing. Words may help, words may be important at times, but that connection is not dependent on words. So what is it? I can't say I pretend to know, but I have of intimation about how important it is and how it develops and how it fades away. Yesterday, I did this event here for the book. I was invited to speak at the Unity Library to do a book discussion. And then, because I don't like to just do that, there was an eco workshop afterwards on a beautiful here in Unity. The Sandy Stream goes through, and there's a Connor Mill Trail along the stream, and it's a wonderful place to do a little eco workshop. So that was the plan. We spent an hour at the library talking about the book, and then we went to do the eco workshop. And the day could not have been more wonderful. We're just about at peak foliage here. The colors were spectacular. The stream was just alive. The woods were alive. colors, vibrant. And it was, kind of a really nice fall day, temperature in the low 50s, and it was just perfect. It couldn't be better. And the book discussion was very nice. Okay, it was it went very well. And then we went out to the stream. And I don't know how many people went out to, it was like 8 or 10 people initially went out there to do the walk, to do the experience. And then people started dropping away for various reasons. There was a young couple who came with their baby, and the baby was in a little carrier on this young man's chest. But understandably, there was only so much time that they could keep the baby engaged. It obviously has no real interest in eco-spirituality. And so they had to leave, and which was unfortunate, because friends of mine who were their friends said that this was something they really wanted to do. But anyway, okay, they left. And then after a while, some other people left. And one woman decided she wanted to just go walk on her own, and she went off walking by herself. Well, what happened was that the energy drained away. It's almost worse to have that drained than to not have the energy. I would rather start with 2 people than start with 10 and end up with 2 people, because all along the way draws the energy out of me as the person who's facilitating and presenting. It's like, at first I didn't even notice it. And then I start noticing. It's like, okay, I can't stay as engaged. I can't stay as energized. So this energy is so important. And the energy arises out of connection. It arises out of intimacy. And it arises when our ego is not the predominant factor, right? We can only connect in this way when we're not in a ego-dominant mode. I was talking with this about them, like in terms of the eco-spirituality workshop. How do we usually show up for the natural world? Well, the analogy I was using was a first date. Imagine showing up on a first date and say, "Hi, I'm Peter. Let me tell you about me, what I need, and how you can serve my needs." Now, some of you may have had that date, but it's not an ideal way to start a relationship. And yet that's kind of how we show up even into the natural world. We don't show up relationally. We don't show up to make connection. We show up to serve our needs in some way. So this is a profound shift to say, no, I'm in relationship. I'm in relationship with this tree, just as I would be with a human partner. And therefore, I want to know what it needs, what it wants, what it thinks, what its hopes and dreams are. You want to go that way. And only do that by getting my ego out of the way. That's the only way that I can truly begin to make connection, especially because it's far subtler. I mean, a human will be right out there and say, well, I need this, I need that. A tree doesn't do that, right? We got to work. We got to work to make connection with the tree. We got to work to fall in love with the tree. And we can. And we need to. And we need to share this with people that we love and care about and are close to. And it's easy. We don't have to preach. We just have to create that space in our relationships. People will inherently respond. Robert isn't here today, but if he was, we'd talk a little, about, he and I chat about therapy every so often. That's to me, and I think he agrees too, that's the basis of therapy. Basis of therapy is really listening, being there for the other person and caring. Intimacy. Everything else is window dressing. I often argue that, if you're familiar with therapy, there's all these techniques, most of, with letters, CBT, DBT, QRST, etc. But I think those are just the window dressing that allows us to get close enough to be intimate, because intimacy is scary. And if I'm just sitting there across the room from you, and we're one-on-one, it's like people are going to run away. But we say, okay, let's talk about some cognitive skills now. Okay. It's a safe place to be intimate. It's interesting. But I believe it's the intimacy, it's the connection that heals in therapy. Not that the techniques are bad, not that they don't help sometimes. We all can improve our thinking. There's no doubt about that. Cognitive therapies make sense and they work. But I think at the root, the real healing that takes place is that connection. So intention, connection, intimacy, love. Those are the words. That's the formula for our lives and for our time. So badly needed. So I listened to another Brad Warner talk this morning. Brad just gets me. His titles are so wonderful. It's like, I got to listen to this. And so this was about enlightenment as eternal bliss. I may not be quoting it exactly right, but that was the title. And I was hooked right away. I want that eternal bliss. So I wanted to see what Brad had to say about it. And again, Brad played his bass, and his dog was pissing in the background. He's kind of got his shtick that's unique. But what he said, I just fundamentally agreed with everything he said today. And what he talked about was that the danger of that attachment to that idea of enlightenment as some kind of a permanent blissful state that we're going to enter. And as he rightly pointed out, that when we talk about enlightenment, we have now created a thing, right? We have created a concept. We have created an entity. And then probably in each of our imaginations, that's something different. And one of the ways that we can imagine it is he's talking about this kind of state of eternal bliss. Doesn't matter whatever we consider it and believe it to be, we have now not only created this thing, but we now have the opportunity to attach to it. So now we're desiring this enlightenment. We're desiring this ecstasy. We're desiring this state of bliss. And we've just shot ourselves in the foot once again. And it's so easy to do. I mean, the person that was Brad had gotten on this topic because he was reading a Hindu teacher who was talking about it. So this is a universal human tendency to want to do this, to want to create, and it's a tendency to want to escape this world, to escape this reality, to leave all the mud and the blood and the pain and the fear and all that, and be someplace wonderful. Right. And we could see that that's maybe one of the most pernicious attachments, because exactly that, it's our desire to get out of this life, to negate this life, to somehow transcend this life, rather than engaging with this life, living this life, and being an actor in the world for healing, for intimacy, for loving kindness, for love. It's the exact opposite tendency. It's another selfish desire. It's another Rolex watch, another Ferrari. I got on that the other day because I saw an ad for Rolex watches, and I'm thinking, okay, I understand. There are people who have money. They want to spend money on things. I get that. There's some nice things in this world, but $20,000 for a wristwatch? Come on, folks. What is that about? What is that about? So as you go forward, as we go forward in our days, we need to kind of constantly come back to reminding ourselves about these things, about connection, about intimacy, about loving kindness. And for the most part, it's really quite simple. Simple, not easy. We need to just get all the other stuff out of the way. We need to meet the tree on its terms. We need to meet our neighbors on their terms. We need to set our egos aside long enough to open those doors. To allow our intention to flow through. Right? Back to that idea of intention. Our intention to heal, our intention to be compassionate, our intention to offer loving kindness. I know I'm probably, the older I get, the more of a broken record I'm becoming. But this is where it's this not only for us as practitioners, but for us as a culture and for us as a world. We need to cultivate these qualities in ourselves, and we need to give them away to others as much as we can. Thank you.
Peter, I thought it was interesting the words that you chose to highlight, because the one word that you did not highlight, you highlighted love and intention and connection, but you did not highlight attention. And I know there was a time, oh, a while ago, where I was just really thinking that my way on this path would be to pay more attention, pay more attention, pay more attention. And I think uh, you and some others, I came to the conclusion that I was attaching to the idea of paying attention, like it was a verb rather than a letting go, which I guess is a verb too, but more passive than active. Um, so I did come to see attention differently. But I'm kind of curious how you would explain, as I look at these traits, intention also seems to be something that is an active verb. Love might be more passive if you can achieve your own Buddha nature and just let that flow. But I'm getting confused. So I guess I would be curious to know how you see attention versus setting an intention.
Okay, good. Really, really good question. To start with, when I'm talking about intimacy and connection, you cannot have those without attention, right? You cannot know the tree without paying attention to the tree. You cannot know the person without paying attention. What I'm probably partly reacting to is the sort of mindfulness movement that has sanctified the attention. And the more that I think about it, the more I see that as very self-centered, almost contrary to the Dharma. It's about me feeling better, me feeling less stress. It's not that those are bad things; those are good things, but they're not the same as the Dharma. The Dharma is not about me feeling less stress. The Dharma might mean I need to be more stressed because I'm in this relationship with beings that are suffering, right? Again, in the mindfulness movement, and I'm not saying that this is true necessarily, the leadership of it, there are many wonderful people, Kabat-Zinn and others who are, but the way it sort of filters down often is that people are using it to escape. My friend Erin Scharf and I, who were recording some podcasts for a while, she's a mindfulness teacher, and she's very aware of that amongst her students and in that movement, what she calls spiritual bypassing. It's like, and that's the blissing out, that's the avoiding. So yeah, I probably putting the emphasis, not the attention is a component, it's an important component, but I don't like pulling that one out as much as, I think these others are.
I feel like I want to ask about this too, because it's to sort of clarify something. So, I've had a big problem with the word even attention, because when I started to practice, it was like, it was all about trying to force myself to pay attention, so it was really my ego trying to pay attention, sort of, and fighting against what it wanted to think about or whatever. And so I associate the word pay attention with that, which I think is definitely not the practice that, the real Zen practice. And but what's been helpful to me is And I want to ask you, so, Susan was talking about passivity, that it's passive. But I'm sort of getting the impression that it's actually not passive, that is, the Diamond Sutra says something about think the thought that doesn't depend on any other thought, including sensory thought, that idea that the senses are sort of a form of thought. And then, and we've talked about here before, Dogen has think, non-thinking. So it seems like there's this activity that isn't passive, and it sort of encompasses something that is at the root of an activity that is sort of a kind of thinking, but it is not getting caught in the ideas, any idea. It's sort of this activity that is free of the concepts. So in that sense, it's not passive, is the way I've been trying to practice. And it seems to involve this letting go all the time of concepts that arise. And so that's I would like your response to that.
Which part of that? I mean, paying attention is yet another concept. It's yet another attachment, right? For some of us, it's easier than I have attention deficit disorder. I'm really lousy at paying attention. That's why I loved koan study. Koan study, I had something to chew on. I didn't have to maintain this kind of blank consciousness that I thought I needed to maintain doing shikantaza. And when I do shikantaza now, all kinds of crap comes floating by. And that I believe is the answer. It's not the arising of the crap. It's allowing it to float by. It's not attaching to it. It's, and so our minds do these activities. Those of us who have attention deficit, maybe we do it more than people who don't. I don't know. I've never not had it, so I can't compare. Oh, amphetamines were kind of good for that, but that's a whole nother discussion. But the fact is that so it's not what our mind is doing. And again, this is kind of one of my gripes with the mindfulness move. It's what we're holding on to, grasping, attaching, versus just when Margaret went and got her doctorate, and she got her doctorate in theology, and several of us went to the ceremony, and there was a hymn, it was a Christian hymn, which I thought was really interesting, because the refrain of the hymn was, "Let it come, let it go. Let it come, let it go." And that's really what we're doing in shikantaza, what we're doing in zazen. We're not struggling to pay attention. We let it come, let it go. But we don't grasp onto it as it passes by. We don't romance it and dance with it. And, it's like, okay, there it is, there it goes.
And just to follow up, to me, that what you're describing is active. It feels active. I don't know what to say. It doesn't. I mean, do you have any response to the issue of active versus passive?
Yeah,
in that?
Yes, I think it's both of those things. ideally it's passive, and then I attach and I have to be active and let go. When I find myself chasing the thought, I've got to take action. I've got to let go of that. I've got to, see it. Oh my God, I'm chasing this thought, let it go. Okay. And then I go back to being passive. I'm just there. Thoughts are coming, oh, grab that thought, and then I've got to, so it's both things really, moment to moment.
Thank you.
At some level, one of the other things we're doing is coming to peace with the activities of our mind. My Dharma daughter, Jamie, some of you know, she also has attention deficit. And one of the things that she said is that she never found that Zazen helped her attention deficit, but it helped her live with her attention deficit. And that's a really important distinction. Her mind can be doing all this crazy stuff, and she can let it come, let it go. Okay. It's one of the paradoxes of our practice, that we strive to do better, we strive to be better, and we also need to work to accept ourselves just as we are.
I really liked your answer of it's both things. It's active and it's passive, and that concept of paradox, which I am finding the older I get, the more important it is to hold both sides. Uh, in the world, there's so much awful stuff, and there's also so many wonderful things going on, and it seems like being able to hold both is just a real benefit of practice.
Yeah, and it's a never-ending project, right?
Right.
The whole thing is a mess. This reality, what a mess. And that's the other thing. Kabat-Zinn's term of the whole catastrophe. The whole, as we call it, full catastrophe living or something. We need to, it's a effing mess, and we need to embrace the whole catastrophe. So saying, shall we say our closing vows?
Yes. Speaking of paradox, creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Closing story. And I think I told this one recently, so I apologize. Oh, I wiped you out. No, I just made you disappear. I have powers that I didn't realize. I can just touch a button and you all go away. And now you're back. Okay. So this is I have a friend, Ray, who is a vet, fought in the Vietnam War. Anyway, and so he has a military background, and he became very interested in mindfulness and started attending a lot of retreats and workshop with John Kabat-Zinn, with Shakti Santarelli, became really engaged in the mindfulness movement. And what he started noticing as he was going there, because of who he was, and he saw this, was that there were kind of this steady stream of military guys showing up for these things. And I'm not talking about vets. These were active military guys who worked for the Pentagon. And so Ray was kind of curious because he thought, oh, that's it's just, why are they here, you know? And so he asked them. And the answer was they thought they might be able to use mindfulness to make it easier for soldiers to do their job of shooting other soldiers. Now, that's not new. The samurai figured that out, you know? So that's the other side too, you know, what may be in a healthy context, healthy practices can in an unhealthy, you know, I think that's the darkest time we've got some dark times in the history of Zen. The darkest time, I think, was when we were using Zen to help people cut off the heads of their adversaries without having, you know, guilt. They used to say it was without making karma, you know, and yeah, so we're back to intention, Okay. Good. Everybody have a good day and a good rest of the weekend.